The only chance our children are really going to have in their formation comes from the mothers and the fathers. Everything they receive, all their possessions and all of their faith and so much of their knowledge comes from you. You are channels of grace to your children. So just again, continue to remind yourself that, again, I'm not saying that you don't have to worry about laundry or jobs, but make sure that when you're picking a job, that it's in coordination with what you need to do as a husband and father. You're not going to take a job where you're never going to be home, just because you need to pay for the homeschool. You do what you have to do, but make sure you're not doing more, is what I'm trying to say. And the reason why, again, to stress, I'm going to stress this so much. The reason why we're in the situation we are in the society, deeply secularized, in the secularization of our church, is because the world en masse is turning away from God and embracing the world, the flesh, and the devil. They're being poisoned and they want more. They don't see the harm that it's doing to them, and even if they do see the harm, they don't do anything to remedy it. A devout spiritual life is a foreign concept for most, as evidenced by the dramatic lack of reverence for the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist and Eucharistic adoration. How many people do you see there? You have the real presence of Jesus Christ here on earth. You can spend time with Him. How many people do you see there? How many people are paying the reverence due to the Eucharist at the Mass? How many people are receiving Him unworthily? Attendance at Mass is no longer even seen as a serious obligation under the pain of mortal sin, which sadly accounts for the hordes of people that are the Christmas and Easter Catholics. We don't see in the rest of the year. That is mortal sin, and then they receive Jesus. The magnitude of Catholics no longer in full communion with the Church is not even remotely close to the number of people seeking reconciliation through the sacrament of confession. And for the good people that aren't actively going against the Church, that aren't actively working against His body, and meet those bare minimum obligations, you have to ask yourself also, what good are they really achieving? Remember, all it takes for evil to advance is for good people to do nothing. We've heard that time and time again with regards to abortion. And now we have, today, the legalization of sodomy. This date goes down in history, and I don't think it's a mistake that we've had 3 talks on battles on this particular date. We did not plan that. We did not coordinate it. It just happens to be that's what the Holy Spirit guided us to go talk about. What does failing to answer the call really mean? If this message that I'm sharing with you sounds rough and tough, that's because niceties and kind platitudes aren't going to convey the significance of our times. You can try to ignore the gravity of our times, but realize that the enemy is not going to ignore you. You can look away and choose to ignore the evils of this world, but what you cannot do is you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring the evils of this world. So let's cross that threshold. Let's get beyond the refusal phase of our Catholic adventure right here and right now, and let us cross that threshold from the land of the familiar and venture into new territory. No matter where you are in your faith life right now, there is always room for improvement. That is one lesson my grandfather drilled into me. It's one of those sayings that your elders share with you and you hear for the years in your life. There's always room for improvement. And that room for improvement should be the largest room in your house. Think of it that way every time you go home. So I'm going to ask you all, close your eyes for a moment, and I want you to imagine in your mind the faces of each and every member of your family. For those of you with exceptionally large families, we'll give you extra time. I want you to contemplate their smiling faces. I want you to contemplate their hands holding yours. I want you to imagine the sound of their beating hearts, and all that makes them beautiful, so beautifully unique than any other human being that has ever lived or will ever live. Contemplate that. Contemplate how God has willed for you all to be together as a family in this time. Let us say together, thank you to God for placing these souls into our lives, and let us commit ourselves anew to doing absolutely all that God's grace will accomplish through us for the sake of returning these souls back to Him. You can look forward. Thank you. I saw many of you actually doing that. Thank you. In discerning in this new land who our enemies are and who our friends are, it's important to note that a strong Catholic witness depends on the right understanding of the faith and its demands, which is provided by sound catechesis. Decades of a thin and even false catechesis has led many, perhaps even a strong majority, of Catholics to be unaware or confused regarding the most fundamental tenets of the faith and moral law. In America today, where most people, even the poor, have access to a wealth of information via the internet, even here on our belts, our smartphones, we have a wealth of information available to us. The time of pleading ignorance is over. We cannot plead ignorance of the truth. Therefore, one of the allies we need to seek out are holy and orthodox sources of information that we can trust and rely on for providing us with an ever-increasing knowledge of the faith. It goes without saying, you can't defend the faith if you don't know the faith. And there's always more to learn. Remember, there's always room for improvement. That's the one thing I've learned in my reversion, is as I was coming back, and I got a taste of new knowledge, I think, wow, I know so much. I know more than all these other Catholics. And then I come to realize soon afterwards, boy, I was drinking from a teacup before. And I thought when I moved to the picture, I was doing really good. But now I've come to realize that really I'm drinking from a pitcher, but there's a whole ocean out there. Okay? There's always more to know. You have 2,000 years history of the Catholic Church. Can't know it all, but you should be all right. So at a minimum, we should be reading the Bible and the Catechism of the Catholic Church on a daily basis and referring to them both when questions arise. These are, again, some of the more core tenets of our faith. Second, be in the habit of reading faithful spiritual books, whatever the Holy Spirit is guiding you toward at this moment in your life. Don't think you have the time for that. I hear that all the time. I don't have time to read a spiritual book. I have those challenges myself. You should have time on Sunday. By faithfully observing the Sabbath and avoiding all unnecessary work, and I mean all unnecessary work, no shopping, nothing else, you should have plenty of time. Don't even go on the computer on Sundays. You'll say it's not work. You know the computer sucks your time. You know you get in there and it's a rabbit hole. You just go down, before you know you've been on there for 3 hours. Could have gotten a lot of reading done in 3 hours. It should be you, your family, and God all getting together for a very, very, very long conversation. There should be a lot of quiet reading and prayer time in the home on Sundays. Let's make it obvious to all, especially our kids, that Sunday has been set aside for the Lord. That's a commandment. We teach the kids the commandments in our homeschool. Let's live it. Furthermore, there are so many daily battles being waged. Today, no different, with the ruling on so-called gay marriage from the Supreme Court. Boy, that'll throw you off, won't it? There are so many daily battles being waged. We need to keep the lines of communication open to all of our intelligence agents with their boots on the ground. These are faithful news reporters that are working for the sake of feeding you information that you won't get anywhere else. You're not going to get the truth from the mainstream media. Don't even bother. Don't even try to discern some nugget of truth out of there. It's all slanted. So seek out true, trustworthy sources of information from faithful Catholic sources, but I also say trust but verify. Opinions can still get merged into blog posts and articles and even other aspects from Catholic sources. So trust but verify, because bad intelligence information can lead you to fighting on the wrong side of the battle. Study, study, study. And if you discover that you've made a mistake regarding a matter of faith and morals, be willing to admit the mistake and to rectify the situation. Let's think about some other allies. Form faithful Catholic communities, Catholic homeschool support groups, men's support groups, moms groups. Get together, pray rosary, support each other. I understand you need some time away from the family, from the kids, go talk to other moms. You don't want to do goo-goo gaga talk all the time. We understand that. Men, we really pump each other up. I enjoy the relationships that I have with other men because I feed off of that. Iron strengthens iron. Seek it out. If you don't have men's groups, moms groups, find them. Form one. Okay, find one, make one. At the same time, we need to be especially cautious of the enemies within the church, that are wolves in sheep's clothing, that seek to twist and pervert the truth. One tactic of theirs is to hide lies in between two truths to disguise their deceit. Other times they'll just flat out lie to your face with the expectation that they won't even get caught, either through your own personal ignorance of the truth or our unwillingness to call them out on the lie. We can see this today in the Synod of the Family. If you've been following the Synod of the Family from the Vatican, we have high-ranking clergy members are actively floating around proposals that seek to undermine unchangeable aspects of Catholic teaching regarding marriage and divorce. They want to give Holy Communion to everybody. And we know, again, if we go back to the whole lack of reverence, the true presence of Jesus, this is not a wafer. This is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, and we have active members of the clergy seeking to perform sacrilege. They tell us, though, in their statements, it's not to seek a change to the doctrine. It's just a change to our pastoral approach. Let me tell you what that does. For those of us with eyes to see, these attempts are truly aimed at a secular mainstream media, which feeds the majority of the information to many of the lukewarm Catholics we talked about earlier. That is their sole authoritative source. These lukewarm Catholics would never trust the Vatican, something authoritative from the Vatican, but they'll trust a 60-second slanted news story from some person on TV. Because if it's on TV, it's true, right? They know how these tactics work. They know the nature of human nature.